to go? Excellent. Good evening, everybody. I'm Nicola Anderson. I'm the Chief Exec at FinTech Scotland, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you here this evening on this gorgeous evening here in Edinburgh to this meetup with the Data Lab community. Thank you very much to the Data Lab for inviting me to host this evening's session as we focus on the financial services sector, which is a fantastic opportunity to come together on that. I have a script which I am making sure I follow, particularly at the beginning. The very important point for us here in the room is that there are no fire drills, which is important to know. So if you do hear that alarm, then we will all use the exits and evacuate as appropriate. And the second thing for me to say is a very warm welcome to those online that are joining us. And we hope very much that you find this insightful. I'm absolutely amazed at the reach the Data Lab community has across 80 countries and over 5,000 people. So it's incredible that we have that opportunity, and perhaps we are speaking to that many tonight online. So it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So let me give you some background to the session this evening. The Data Lab is a really important part of our ecosystem here in Scotland. At least that's how I view it as in my seat as the Chief Exec in FinTech Scotland. And it's absolutely fantastic that there is this focus this evening, and indeed during this month, on financial services and the role that data and innovation plays as we develop the future of finance. We very much think about that when we are creating our strategy and driving our opportunities in FinTech innovation here in Scotland. And tonight you're going to hear from some amazing businesses, researchers, and indeed entrepreneurs as we think about the opportunity that data presents for us. We have 237 FinTech businesses here in Scotland, and that number continues to grow. We also have real depth and heritage and innovation in financial services in Scotland. Indeed, Scotland can be attributed to things like creating the banknote, in case anybody didn't know. They can also be associated with the creation of the overdraft. And now I'm taking you all the way back to many, many, many years ago, and indeed centuries. But there is depth of history and innovation in financial services. And it's only right that as we think about the opportunity that data presents for our innovation focus, that we are having this focus this evening on the financial services sector. One specific plug from me, if I may. So at FinTech Scotland, we are here to drive a couple of things. We talk about our innovative community of FinTech entrepreneurs, of which I've just mentioned there are 237 businesses, ranging from startups all the way to unicorns, actually. And in addition, we drive an innovation strategy for the financial services sector. We do that focused on a number of key themes. There are 4, one of which is innovation and financial regulation. Very exciting topic there, I'll have you know. And we have just launched an innovation call. So if there is anyone in the audience or indeed watching online that has an interest in ESG data and its application into financial services, and indeed the regulatory environment to answer some of these big questions that our financial institutions are grappling with, then please do have a little look at that. We'd be delighted to see those applications come through and indeed support you as you think about making that. So thank you. I did promise I'd mention that, and we have put it on the Data Lab community slides. So I've just mentioned the Data Lab community. There is a QR code here to make sure that you join that if you're not already a member. And I'm hoping that I'm doing the Data Lab team justice. I'm sure there's somebody who's well practiced at the hosting of these that has this flow. But I've just talked a little bit about the breadth and the depth of that community, which is fantastic. So what you can expect this evening is we have 3 amazing speakers. They're going to give a short presentation on their particular area of expertise, their business, and bring to life that kind of data opportunity in financial services for you. And then we're going to go into a panel session from there. So at that point, we will open it up to questions from the audience, of course. I have a few questions which I have prepared, but much prefer to hear those questions from you on the floor. So if you get your thinking caps on as we start that would be brilliant. And then, of course, we're going to end the evening with that open mic opportunity. And as I understand it, there are one or two already in the audience who are thinking about making sure that they have that space. So we'll make sure we have time for that. So without further ado then, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Magdalena from the Smart Data Foundry. And I'll allow you to make a better introduction for yourself and talk about your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello everyone, so I'm Magdalena, I'm the head of research at Smart Data Foundry, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do. But essentially I oversee our research proposition, the vision and strategy. Alongside research we also have innovation and insights, but I'll mention all of them. So in terms of who we are, so we're based at the University of Edinburgh. We're actually spin out of University of Edinburgh, based at the Base Centre, but shortly moving to the Edinburgh Futures Institute, really beautiful building. And in a nutshell, what we do is we provide secure access to financial data for research in public interest. So that's really important. So that data is available to researchers, academic researchers across the UK. The financial data, so we're prioritizing at the moment, we're focusing on financial data. The financial data is coming from our trusted data partners. So we work with banks, with a variety of financial institutions, cloud accounting companies and so forth. And the data is available in our trusted research environment. So it's a secure computing environment that we can do your analysis. We're funded by government, UKRI Strength and Places Fund. So that's our major funding. Okay, so in terms of this visualization shows you sort of where we exist. So we occupy that privileged but quite challenging position between private sector, so that's where the data comes from, public sector and academia. So as you can imagine, if you work in one of those sectors, they're quite different in terms of values or motivations or reward systems, quite different language quite often as well. So what we do, so we're in that space of ensuring that or supporting or enabling data-driven decision-making. Data-driven decision-making in private sector and public sector. And it's very much about how can we provide evidence-based policy making. I went to a workshop recently, and one of the funders from UK was saying that 70% of policy questions could be answered with current research. So it just shows you that those two sectors are quite not as connected. So we want to play a part, and obviously it's not just us, we're quite small, non-for-profit, about 40 people. But what we try to do is really how can we bring advances in research to government and engage academic researchers with policymakers. In terms of, so we're mission-led as well, and we obviously focus on creating impact. We're doing quite a lot of work with public sector, and this is quite fascinating when the financial data at aggregate level can be used to, for example, show the effects of governments, policy on actually people and local authorities, and then how the local authorities can help people on the ground, with interventions or a variety of support, especially in the times of cost of living. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit more about the actual data now. So as you can see, so financial data is obviously quite, one of our flagship data sets comes from NatWest, so that's 1.2 million banking data, and that's recently increased to 5 million. So it's quite big data, rich, granular, and what's really important is objective. So for example, if you're a researcher, you might do research into how people are, spending their money and so forth. So people will tell you, so there will be surveys and so forth. But this is actually looking at, objectively, it's a behavioral data. So actually you can start seeing, okay, what's happening on the ground, how people are, where the income is coming from, how people are spending money. And this is, as I say, this is very much in the purpose to address social issues, social change. So this is not for commercial research. This is primarily focusing on, social change research. So it's a big change, right? I mean, up until now, researchers don't have access to private sector data. So this is something quite unique, what we're doing. There's no any other company or non-for-profit organization across the UK that really provides access to kind of money infrastructure. You can get there's some information from the government, but this is really quite unique. So we know that we're in a quite revolutionary new space, obviously. And that data, so as I said, it's a journey. So private companies we see are much more open to share their data. They see the benefit of sharing the data. And it's really quite exciting. And obviously that data up until this point is mostly used by private companies to improve their products or services. But looking beyond that, that's just really powerful. So that's our space. So this data is sensitive, right? Because it contains personally identified information, so your name, address. All of that is, of course, de-identified by our data partner. But obviously there is always a risk of re-identification. So always need to be very, very careful. So this data is kept in the trusted research environment, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a second. We've also, 2 years ago, we participated in the Information Commissioner's Office Sandbox in terms of, how do you provide access to this data for research purposes? So this data is different to, for example, 5 minutes ago. This data is quite different to, for example, open banking data because, it's consent-based. This one is legitimate interest. So essentially, before we embark on any research projects, we'll be doing assessment in terms of, what is the value of that data for research, for social change, what are the risks, what are the benefits to people, to the society, and so forth. Very quickly, so yes, that data is in the trusted research environment. So anyone from academia will hear that the environment is managed by EPCC, and then we govern it. So there's information governance, ethics. So we have a variety of processes ensuring that only approved researchers can have access to this data, and this data is always done for research and public interest. We also use ONS 5 safe, so obviously ensuring that the data is kept in the right, it's ethical. You cannot, in the trusted research environment, there's lots of controls in place. You cannot copy and paste. You cannot, there's multi-factor authentication, VPN. And the most important thing, the data can never leave the trusted research environment. So you as a researcher are only allowed to do data in that environment. And then your analysis are then checked by our team, data operations, information governance, make sure that there's nothing re-identifiable in the data. So very quickly, if anyone is a researcher, so you know that at the moment, the traditional source of data, so you do experiments, you do surveys, and so forth. Also, government is really opening up their data, so there's very similar controls in place, but access, you as a researcher, you can get access now to DWP data and so forth, but it's obviously, it's quite a prolonged process. And we are in the new space, in the private sector data. Very quickly, how the data comes in. So you can see that we get some demographic data, which is personal identifier. We have information about the age band, sex, and the postal district. So just the first half of the postcode district. So you've got the geographical identifier. And then we get categories across income and expenditure. So for example, income, where is income coming from? Is it salary, benefits, pension, and so forth? And then the expenditure. So for example, committed, so people have credit card payments. So, okay, this is where it would go. Essential, so for example, your groceries will be in this category. And discretionary, so your outings, your going to restaurants will be there. We always ask questions about how representative our data is of UK population, so it's quite interesting. We're doing a lot of research now because we work with researchers, so we need to ensure that the data is representative, but we've done some early analysis with ONS, compared data to National Record Scotland. So across, you can see at the top here, in terms of coverage for age, gender, and income is pretty representative of the UK overall. And in terms of coverage, so you can see the NatWest data. This is based on the NatWest data. So NatWest data is a national bank, so obviously they also own Royal Bank of Scotland. So you can see slight overrepresentations across Scotland because of the historical, the Royal Bank of Scotland. But overall, is around, you can see the representation across the whole UK. And this is what we're doing with this data. So this is very exciting bit. So we work with, as I said, with local authorities where that data is presented. So what's happening on the ground, it's aggregated and is presented, on a map. They can also add their own data, so administrative data, for example. One council is adding data in terms of, for example, council tax, indebtedness, or free school meals. So they can, depending on what they're trying to address. So one of the local authorities is very much concerned with cost of living and how is that affecting their people on the ground. So that's the information. We can also pull in any open data. So that's mapped. And this is quite interesting because when we've done it for them a year ago, so you can see two plots here. On the left-hand side, you can see that this is what the area where they actually knew that there were some people in financial difficulties. They were already providing support. On the right-hand side, suddenly they discovered all those people who are actually extremely in overdraft, but not really taking up much financial support. So they had to think about, okay, how can we, there's potentially stigma attached because it's quite affluent area actually, so which they thought, okay, so how can we address, how can we help those people? Because clearly just going and offering food banks is not working. So it just shows you how the local authority can become creative and really, think about targeted interventions. Income volatility, so this is very quickly as well. So we're doing some work with Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is a charity who's fighting poverty. This is, again, curated data set on income volatility. So researchers have access to this, and we're doing, so this is based on NatWest data as well, and we've done some other calculations, mostly looking at the payment intervals. So for example, looking at, if you are in you have a steady income, obviously your income will not change as much. But if you're in a gig economy, it's going to be going up and down depending on weeks. So this is quite powerful as well. This just shows you quite quickly, just a very quick look at, you can see quite high income variability in the north, in the islands, and actually southern Wales as well. And we have researchers already working on, for example, looking at the impact of interest rates on housing costs. So obviously you can start seeing in real time the macroeconomic shocks. For example, interest rates going up, how is that affecting people on the ground? So the main thing I would like you to take out of it is that the power of this data is that it is near real time. Its objective is behavioral, but also it's near real time. So you can start seeing, okay, what is happening right now? So we get this data weekly. Another example of how the impact of interest rates on consumer spending. And I'll just finish, this is just a quick sort of summary of the work we've been doing. So essentially our themes are climate, so we work on net zero affordability, so how much people can, for example, afford to retrofit their housing. This is obviously what government is trying to incentivize people with loans, but actually what people can afford in terms of cost of living. There is a lot of research we're doing into the socioeconomics of poverty, and climate. So we also work with Fraser-Allaire Institute. So if you're in Scotland, so they provide economic commentary quarterly, so we're working with them. We've recently applied for funding to the Aberdeen Trust in terms of research into Scottish child payments, so that's quite interesting incentives. Okay, I'll finish now. Okay, so this is just, maybe I'll finish. We've got Virgin Money. Yeah, there's a variety of things we're doing with this data, but essentially it's data for good, so making social change and helping people.
Probably planted lots of food for thought for questions there during our panel discussion. It's absolutely amazing to see the capability and indeed the credibility at Smart Data Foundry, and I've been sitting there inspired by what you've been saying and sharing with us. I'm really, really proud that Smart Data Foundry are here in Scotland and part of our community and ecosystem. So from there, as we think about research, we're now going to take another look at a different focus on data, and it's my absolute pleasure to invite Kate up to talk to us about your thoughts on data at Teradata, Kate.
Testing, can you hear me? Is that on? Yeah, you're good. Good, thank you. So hi, my name's Kate Brooks. I'm an artificial intelligence specialist at Teradata, working specifically in financial services. And today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about generative AI in Okay. I'd like, oh, there you go. There we go. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about generative AI in financial services and how it might develop going forward. I'm going to begin with a little poll. I'd like to ask who here has been insulted or abused by an AI chatbot? No. Oh, was that a hand up there?
Yeah, there was a classical GPT that was totally designed to be insulting.
Okay. So that was its intent. Was it any good at it? I will look that up. Thank you. Okay, so we've got one instance, but it was deliberate. Has anyone here got an example of real human delighting service coming from an AI chatbot that they've experienced? Brilliant. Can you tell me about that?
My daughter is studying logic as part of her philosophy course, and one of the things she had to do was probability maths questions, and she was really struggling, and she said her tutor wasn't very good at explaining it. So she went on to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to explain it, and she said it was far better than her tutor at university.
Yeah, absolutely. ChatGPT is amazing. And what's interesting with what both of you have talked about is it isn't the service that you're getting from an online bank or the service that you're getting from, I don't know, Groupon or some online service provider. It is going direct to ChatGPT. I personally, I've never been abused by a chatbot, but neither have I had brilliant service from one. In fact, it's been pretty awful whenever I've used an online chatbot, other than ChatGPT specifically. But I think it is coming. I think this is what we know with the advent of ChatGPT and the ability to take that ChatGPT, that LLM capability into those chatbots. The era of generative AI really is here. And, you know, today we want to talk to you about some of what we've been doing at Teradata with that. So for every scary headline that talks about the fact that AI is going to kill us all, there is a big number that one of the consultancies predicts is the value of AI. I cannot validate this number, but it is my opinion that the opportunity to save costs in banking as a result of generative AI is huge. Most of the conversations I've had with UK banks, we've talked about the potential use cases, the potential disciplines where AI could be applied, and it is huge. And if you look at the cost-income ratio and where costs are in banking, there is still a lot of costs in branch staff and call centre staff. And with the advent of generative AI, there is a real opportunity to redeploy some of those people into other places, either in banking or elsewhere. What I'd also like to comment is it is my belief that, what I said earlier, that I haven't had particularly good service from an AI chatbot, I haven't had particularly good service from a call centre agent lately either. The maturity of those people, their ability to communicate with me in my own language, and their expertise of the products, their ability to understand my problem has been lacking in most cases. But based on the experiences we've talked about here with ChatGPT, I genuinely believe that by integrating ChatGPT and large language models into our AI chatbots, we will be able to develop processes, applications, robots that can genuinely understand our customers and access the expert information to meet their needs. So there are many potential applications for generative AI. A research partner, where you two have both talked about ChatGPT, I use it as my research partner on a regular basis, and I find it's absolutely brilliant for researching topics and summarising them very quickly. Within Teradata, looking at the ability, Gen AI assistants to write code, that's another area. In terms of developing new analysts, the ability to write code is going to become less a part of it, as it's more going to be about the ability to understand the data. but generative AI can write code. But the thing we're going to focus on today is the virtual assistant. That is the ability to talk to customers, to understand what they're asking for, and then to be able to access expert information about that customer and the bank's products and services to be able to answer their question. Now, the use case I'm going to talk about is mortgage applications. This is something that Teradata have been developing with an Australian bank. Mortgages are an obvious place to start. When you're in banking, your highest value product tends to be your mortgage. And it's also an area of high complexity, where even your very tech-savvy Gen Ys and millennials struggle not so much with the tech, but actually understanding the concepts involved. Thinking about how much they can afford, and will they have to pay stamp duty, and all of those kinds of things. So, buying a home is a complex process. The chatbot that's been built works right across, but today I'm going to focus on the affordability part. Now, the goal here is a conversation. Is for the person that's applying for the mortgage to feel like they're having a conversation with a trusted advisor. That trusted advisor should understand their concerns, understand their questions, and be able to then provide advice. And that advice should be based upon the facts, upon the processes of the bank, around the understanding of what a mortgage is, but also understanding that individual customer and their circumstances. So the chatbot has been built to ask questions, to talk to the customer, and get basic questions from them around their income and their current spend, and to allow the customer to ask questions about the process of a mortgage. And then the chatbot is able to reach into a system, in this case Teradata, to actually look at that customer's profile and to look at how much that customer has been earning, so it can calculate salary and variability within salary, which saves the customer having to ask that question and going off and getting pay slips. It can also look up the information around what the customer's got in savings, and it can look at what the customer's commitments are, the car payment that it's got, and how much it's spending on avocados and Starbucks potentially. Based on that, it's then able to do some calculations and actually work out, is this customer ready to buy a home? Do they have sufficient deposit? Based on the loan to income ratios and what they're currently earning, how much would we be willing to lend them, and is that enough to buy a flat or a house in their area? And then it can make recommendations to the customer around whether or not that customer is currently ready to purchase a house, they've got sufficient deposit and they've got sufficient affordability. If so, how much would we lend them and how much would it cost? And if the chatbot doesn't feel they're in that position yet, it can advise them why, i.e. insufficient deposit, and actually start to advise them on what it will take to actually get into that position. So the chatbot can be having this conversation from the early 20s, for example, to actually say, well, at the moment, you haven't got sufficient deposit. You're going to need a £10,000 deposit. You've only got £4,000 at the moment. To save that £6,000 is going to take you 3 years, and that's based on you giving up your Starbucks habit and a little bit lower discretionary spend. So the chatbot can have these types of conversations. The basis of the chatbot, these are some of the basics. It's quite a good basic use case in generative AI. It consists of prompt engineering. So the prompt engineering will set the scope. It will set the scope of the chatbot as the agent and set the scope of the relationship between the customer and the agent. You use a foundation large language model for the common conversation that understands what the customer is asking and is able to reply in mortgage terminology and in the customer's language. You then put in place policy rules. Now, those of you that know anything about AI will know that it can have it can hallucinate, so it can make things up, and it can do a number of things like insult you. The policy rules are there to prevent it from doing that. So where you have known areas where it could insult you, you can put certain filter blocks and restrictions in to sort of set the rules of engagement as to how the chatbot will work. The important thing that combines that large language model that's talking to the customer to give it the expertise is the retrieval augmented generation. That enables the chatbot to be talking to a database such as Teradata, to be retrieving things like the rules for a mortgage. So, for example, the 3 times income multiples, the 90% loan to value. It can be retrieving information around what the circumstances are for lending, and also retrieving the information about the customer themselves from the bank's database. And then all of that is put together with a framework called LangChain, which facilitates the integration and chaining of large language models to create expert artificial intelligence applications. So that's the basics of how it's put together. At the end of the day, all of this is all very well, but where there is huge opportunity, there is also huge risk. I don't know what your beliefs are, but I certainly believe that within the next 5 years, we are going to see massive change in service industries as a result of AI chatbots and this capability. But banks and other organisations are going to have the right processes around their model management and around these processes to govern and control them. We saw the headline at the beginning, both the regulators and the newspapers will be on them very quickly if the AI models start doing unethical things. So banks are going to have the right processes in place to make sure they're monitoring those models for bias and discrimination. They're going to have to make sure that it still, at the end of the day, comes down to having the right data. And then obviously data privacy and data security is a given, but that isn't any different than anything else. The last point that I put there is around cultural acceptance. I think if you talk to a lot of older or vulnerable people in society about how they feel about chatbots and AI chatbots as a way of helping them, I think many of them will feel nervous at the moment. But it's very much my belief that those are the very people that these types of processes will be massively beneficial to. People who need more help than just going online to an app that isn't very intuitive. Chatbots should be able to help them through it from the comfort of their own home, and actually be able to give them much more expert advice than they are able to get from the agents in call centres at the moment. So done well, this is a huge opportunity to not just reduce costs within banking, but also to improve the service that everyone in society is receiving from their banks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Andrew is our last speaker at this stage, and then we will move on to the questions. Before we start with you, Andrew, I thought it might be useful just to gauge the room. Can I get a hands up if you have worked in financial services or if this is a new sector to you? Or sorry, have you worked in financial services? Let me just be clear on my question. Yeah, and for those of you that this is a new sector? Okay, great. That's very helpful as I think about questions later. Andrew, over to you. Tell us all about data at Lloyds and AI.
Thank you. I have a bit of a cold and I've only one slide. So let me just... Okay, so my name's Andrew McDonald. I have 2 jobs, believe it or not. One is I'm a professor at Glasgow University in data product engineering, sponsored by the Royal Academy. And that means I am officially employed 4 hours a week at the university, and I teach a course in Q3 on data product engineering for the master's students. But my day job is I'm core technology platform lead for the data platforms at Lloyds Banking Group. One of the things Lloyds, like most of the big organisations that are out there at the moment, are looking at data as a core enabler and a core asset to help drive value and drive improvements in customer quality and customer service. And what I thought I would do is just signpost some of the things that we are doing. We have a goal where we want to be culturally one of the biggest fintechs in the UK. So what does that mean? Well, I thought I'd colour that with what are we doing in generative AI. So we have several generative AI use cases that we have up and running, covering the creation of training data for conversational bots, improving search, which is, as you can imagine, I've heard people talk about banking as technology, and I am a great believer that banking is also data. And recognising things like conversational intents to help support customer journeys are really, really important. So, in order to help harness the power of this technology, we have mobilised a generative AI programme across the bank. And that consists of several work streams with a focus on architecture and platform considerations, and importantly, ethical controls. We have also specifically built up a team to respond to the ethical risks that emerge from AI, with some of the best thinkers in the country, with PhDs and relevant skills and practical experience of large language models, but also to artificial intelligence ethics. In addition, we're not just resting on the skills that we have in-house, but we're also working very closely and partnering with the likes of Google, Microsoft, OpenAI and IBM. And we're constantly assessing the offerings that are out there to ensure they have the appropriate guardrails in place for responsible deployment. So given I've got a sore throat, and I'm hoping to answer some questions, I'm going to finish there, Nicola. Just a quick chat, and we can now move on to the panel session, if that's okay.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you very much. If I could invite all of the speakers up, please. We are going to start with some Q&A, and we are hopefully going to have a number of those questions coming from you on the floor. For those of you that don't work in financial services, I thought there were a number of terms there that might be worth just having a moment on. And in particular, Magdalena mentioned open banking. And it's important, actually, as we think about the sector in which we're about to talk. So financial services, of course, is a heavily regulated sector. You can hear that being picked up by some of the information that all of the team here have shared this evening. And indeed, we get a lot of our guidance from the regulations and how it's informed. But equally, that regulated sector have a number of regulators who have competition remits. And the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in particular, is one of those that is driving a more innovative agenda. Part of our opportunity in terms of banking, or in terms of data in the financial services sector, has been this concept of open banking. And that is a piece of legislation that has been driven by some work that the Competitions and Markets Authority did to really drive more competition in our retail banking sector. And to allow us to do that, we have been very thoughtful about the processes, the practices and the procedures that are required to allow third parties access to some very sensitive data, and only with a consumer's consent. So it's right that you hear ethical considerations, it's right that you hear all of that from our panel, but open banking has been a significant step in the financial services sector, and indeed we'll wait to see what's next, and that might be one of the questions I ask later on. So that's a useful context, I think, just to set the scene. Can I get a sense of questions in the room? Have burning questions in the room? Okay, well, I'm gonna continue then. So we've talked about data, and Andrew, you said that in your view, banking is data. But let's take that step back and just think about what's your view on how significant data is in the financial services sector? And indeed, what is data in the financial services sector?
I think that's an excellent question. There's probably 10 doctoral theses in answering that, but I will try and do it justice and with some brevity. For me, I once heard someone talk about data in three aspects, in terms of the core data itself, the insight you get from data, and the resulting action you can take from that. And for me, data is the foundation that drives the right insight and encourages either a human or a chatbot or supports a digital customer journey to help provide a task and help successfully deliver an outcome to a customer. And for me, that's what data is. It's more than just the ones and zeros and the representation of the information. It's about supporting the insight, and then from that insight, helping take the right action to support a customer outcome.
Wonderful, thank you. I have to make sure the mic's on. Let me just go down the line. Magdalena, what's your thoughts from a different perspective, perhaps?
Yeah, totally different perspective. So data for good. So for us, data is literally what we do. So we take the data from financial sector and we want to make sure that this data is used beyond the sort of, as I was saying, improving products, services for your customers, but actually addressing the complex challenges we're facing, climate change, cost of living, that kind of stuff. So that's to me the power, and how that data can then influence policy making. That can actually make the difference to people. That's what we're all about, and that's what data means to me.
Yeah, great. That kind of strategic view, setting the right framework, and then actually the delivery in terms of customer outcomes. And Kate?
Based on my age, I've got a historical context on this really, which is when I first started working at Lloyds Banking Group, I worked in a branch. They hadn't invented the internet at the time, and every transaction had, two pieces of paper, a debit and a credit, and customers came in, and you knew about those customers through gossip and, just knowing them. You knew that their niece's brother's wife was pregnant and they played golf or whatever. And I've seen banking evolve from that world of branches and people living in a community to, apps, to digital, to people being much, much more mobile, and basically to so much being done online. And I've seen the evolution of data, although it hasn't evolved as it needed to, in my opinion, from a byproduct of a few things that happened to actually becoming central. So if you look at, digital banking today, its data is the lifeblood of it. It has to drive it. And if you look at how processes will happen going forward, if you look at something like Uber, where data is how Uber works, and it's the same with banking. And again, I just think data is banking, but it needs to do better.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And you, as you all presented and touched in a variety of ways, it's a kind of ethical view, or indeed how important that is to get that kind of customer perspective, or indeed look at it from a customer's point of view. Perhaps as we think about some of the sizes of these organisations, and maybe Andrew would start with you, how is the significance of data now been considered in your organisation? Right, maybe you could bring that to life right from the top, from the exec all the way through to those that are working with customers.
I think that another great question, and one that probably merits more than I will answer in brevity. But we have a great CEO, Charlie Nunn, and he is very data centric, and he's very aware of the power of data. And Lloyds is a bank that, as you say, very ethically driven, and it's all about how do we harness the power of these technologies and the power of the data in a safe and compliant manner to better serve our customers. And for me, that sums it up in terms of how we go about it. One of the things I highlighted there was, if you look at some of the large language models and generative AI, some of the guardrails we're putting in places, and some of the experts that were brought into the organisation we have working with us to help us make sure that we're doing that, and we're doing that in a safe and compliant manner.
Thank you. And Kate, if I could come to you actually, because you touched on culture and that cultural shift, you know, 'cause that strikes me that comes from the top. And if we're really to take advantage of the opportunity that data and these technologies present, what's your view on that kind of cultural shift?
So all of the banks that we work with as Teradata, you can see, and as Andrew said, you know, that the CEOs are very much aware of this shift and the need for data, but it is competing with a lot of other challenges. It's competing with regulatory challenges, it's competing with financial, economic challenges, etc. So I think there's still, throughout the banks and this is throughout society, I think there's still a lot of work to be done around data literacy. I think in terms of understanding the role of data and the importance of data, and when you create a piece of data, where does it go and what happens to it? Because I think at the moment, data probably still doesn't quite get the prominence it deserves. And that's not for want of trying, but again, people have got to do better.
We might pick up on that in a minute or two as we kind of think about data strategies and priorities perhaps in these organisations on that. But Magdalena, if I could come to you just on that kind of ethical, cultural stream, because, you know, I was sitting listening to you just totally inspired by how you at Smart Data Foundry are using that type of data, but I'm sure those conversations with the organisations that are offering you data for those types of insights, the topics of risks and ethics come up quite frequently. Maybe you could bring that to life.
Of course, I think one key thing is to ensure, so what we're doing is we're assuring data partners about the right, you know, environment to hold that data, and ensuring that only accredited researchers can have access to that data, and following the 5 saves I was just saying earlier from ONS. So, for example, safe setting, you know, so you can only use this data in a very secure, controlled environment. It's managed by APCC. It's the same actually as environment that is used for storing health data. So that's the researchers can, you know, do research on health data, which was obviously so prominent during COVID, where you could see that the change was actually data could sped things up so much, right? Because, you know, normally the research process is you do your research and you publish a paper, and then you're hoping someone will pick it up from policymakers. Suddenly in COVID, it was reverse. You know, you do your research, and at the same time was picked up by policymaking to influence what we're going to do, you know, and obviously the vaccination also, stuff like that. But yeah, we do a variety of checks to making sure that the data is used for only ethical projects. And of course, we're getting a lot more projects, for example, using AI to explainable AI, to, for example, figure out how the data can say how some people may be more affected, how we can pick up financial vulnerability in the data. So yeah, we have to come up with prepared checklists. We're guided here by Alan Turing Institute. So yeah, it's definitely a huge part of what we do. But yeah, we're very much, onto your point, we're very much data driven. We have data scientists, you know, data operations, data engineers. We're pretty much run by data people. So I think it's easier from that point of view. Everybody really understands data and the value of data. There's not many people who actually don't understand data that you didn't work. Smart Data Foundry, I guess. So,
indeed. And
so that's easier. Yeah.
It gives that kind of confidence to those who you're interested in getting different types of data from, doesn't it? So that's fantastic. I'm going to check in with the floor to see, there we are. See, we've got questions. Right, I'm coming to this gent first, and then this lady, and then the gent. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I was curious about, you spoke about using large language models for sort of mortgage approvability or customer interaction, I suppose. Does the model ever surprise you or spit out, you know, novel customer solutions that you hadn't thought of, or affordability for mortgages, or does it serve primarily as a shortcut to get to the answer that a human would have provided?
So the goal is that it will serve as a shortcut, but again, it's still being trained, I would say. You can actually try the model on our website. It's actually there as a demo. So sometimes it does still come up with surprising things, but again, this is where you put it back into the policy layer as you're testing it. If it comes with then things surprising, then you think, okay, what will make that happen? How can you put a rule in to actually stop it going outside of those boundaries? Simon, you've been quite close to the model. Have you seen any? I've got examples of anything surprising we've seen.
Who's Simon?
So Simon, I'm putting front row. Front row, yeah. There.
You need the mic, Simon.
In terms of surprising, I think it was particularly, as Andrew said, it's about the guardrails and the protections that you're putting in place. So everyone's being ultra-conservative at the moment. So the policy layer is absolutely critical in Gen AI, that you modify, and that defines your ethics and your guardrails of how you want that to behave. And at the moment, very traditional conservative banks are making sure that there is very strict controls on how that's being used in place. But it's rapidly changing in the last 2 to 3 months. I think Kate mentioned Australia. You know, as interest rates fall and mortgage prices start to drop, you've got to differentiate on service. You can't differentiate on price anymore. So the competition is going to become really, really tough to acquire and retain your customers.
Thank you, Simon. I'll just come to you.
Thank you. Magdalena, this is a question for you. I was just wondering while you were speaking about data, and you know, you have vast data that you're using day to day. I was wondering, do you have a story, success story that you can share with us, how this data drove like a positive change?
Definitely. So there's been a variety of research projects that are influencing, as I was saying. So for example, our work with public sector is probably the most quickest kind of impact, because as I was saying, you can see pretty much as it happens what's happening in your local authority. And so one thing was when I was showing the map of the area that the council didn't recognize that there were actually people massively in overdraft and really struggling financially, but at the same time there was very little uptake of financial advice, which could be attached to, for example, stigma, because it was a fairly affluent area. So the council pretty much at that point were like, oh, what's happening? So, and that matched the experiences of their kind of workers on the ground, so social workers, that there's an issue. So they had to think on the ground what they can do to actually help those people in a different way. So whether there is, you know, for example, having a food bank in that area didn't work because there's a stigma attached, so they had to think about other creative ways of addressing that. So that's positive. The other thing is we're doing some work with Bank of England, but I can't really talk too much about that. There is the work of net zero affordability, so I was mentioning. There's another, for example, working on a Scottish child payment. So for example, this is currently research looking into, you know, whether it should be increased or decreased. So at the moment, the evidence is qualitative, so it's based on maybe 10 interviews with people who are the recipients of benefit. But you really want to properly evaluate the evidence if you want to change the policy. So I think this is the success stories that are happening at the moment, that what you can do with that data to actually provide evidence for change.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll take this next question from the floor.
Hi, thank you. I have a question related to open banking. So I would like to hear what threats and opportunities open banking brings to like financial institutions like Lloyds, NatWest, and how those incumbents can adapt maybe to like protect themselves against like rising competition in that area. Excellent, thank you. Great question. Andrew, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't know, Nicola, if you want to talk about open banking for maybe those who don't understand it as something that was brought in via regulation, and give a little bit of an overview of that, and just help understand that it's about, as you said, exposing data in a safe and compliant way and secure way, but critically with consent from the customer to enable that to happen, and trusted third parties. So there's been big regulation that is driven, particularly the Payment Services Directive 2, and the exposure of certain customer data, as I say, securely and with consent, to trusted third parties that meet the criteria set down by the regulator and the various standards, very high standards, very strong guardrails that are put in place by the various banking institutions that participate within that.
I'm very happy to chip in, actually. I think Andrew's leaning into my financial regulation background. So before I took on this role, I spent a number of years in the Financial Conduct Authority in the supervision arena, or the supervisory function, I should say, of that large institution. And I think what open banking really does, and where we're seeing it deliver outcomes for customers, is it presents new questions and new opportunities in that retail banking sector. Where we've seen it really advance, actually, is in, because at the moment it applies to current account information. With a customer's consent, you can give a third party access to your data. And what we've really seen is questions or opportunities been presented around the affordability journey, around the financial inclusion discussion. We've also seen many more innovations happening around quicker access to services, the onboarding. We've touched a little on some of the opportunities around income volatility. We've seen more outcomes through open banking capability and income maximization, really helping vulnerable customers in particular. So my experience at the moment, both at kind of strategic at FinTech Scotland level and indeed from that ex-regulatory background, is a really positive engagement and opportunity that open banking could present for customers. I think it's my personal view. I think we're just at the beginning of that journey. I think there will be many more opportunities. And indeed, as technology and AI evolves, we may well see those really start to unfold. And I mean, Kate's example there of the mortgage and the affordability in that arena was a really great one. In fact, Kate, why don't I invite you to talk about that?
Yeah, so the simple answer to the question, there's three parts to my answer to the question, is first of all, open banking is both an opportunity and a threat to the banks. Obviously, the threat is it makes them potentially more vulnerable to competition, but it also gives them an opportunity to engage better with the customer, to understand their customers and offer them a much better service, to actually win all of the customer's business. So it is both things. The third part of my answer is that the uptake hasn't been that huge, I don't think. I don't think customers have really bought into it to the extent that they could have done, for lots of different reasons. There's the old thing about apathy, there's understanding it, fearing it, all of those things. But I do think when you come to things like we were talking about the mortgage chatbot, when a bank's ability to service you is based on having that understanding of you, I can only understand you as a bank if I can see all of your products and your whole financial situation. That is more of an incentive. And certainly with Generation Z and the millennials, they are showing a massive willingness to share their data if there is an incentive in it for them. But they've got to understand that incentive.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So if I think as well about the fintech community here, on those that are using open banking to help their capability and proposition, the majority are developing B2B propositions. So to Kate's point around opportunity or threat, actually, my experience in the financial services sector at the moment is that it's creating more of an opportunity for potential partnerships, as opposed to the use of open banking at the minute being used to develop a competitive offering. And that's just creating a much more collaborative environment, actually, that is driving purposeful outcomes for customers, because some of those innovators are coming in with new ideas about how a customer could be served, which is only to the good so far. So positive so far, but I totally agree that we've only scratched the surface. And indeed, I was in New York earlier this year as part of New York FinTech Week, and I think as they talk about their legislative environment for this type of access to data, they're envious of how progressed we are here in the UK. So I think we can cheer on that we're at that advanced point. Are there any other questions from the floor? I'm thinking about time. Oh, there's loads of questions from the floor. Fantastic, fantastic. I'll get my way down to the bottom of the room, but while I'm doing that, perhaps I'm just thoughtful about that point on data strategy and the points that you were raising, Kate. So why don't we kick off on offering a view on the kind of 2 or 3 priorities from a data strategy perspective, and then I'll come back to these questions here. Kate?
Okay, so data strategy, hugely important. I think most of the banks have chief data officers and have been driving forward their data strategies for, at least 8 or 9 years. I think simplification is still a massive priority. Banks have too much data, too much duplication. So I think simplification is a key part to actually deliver the right outcomes. I think integration is key, having systems that can talk to one another so that data isn't siloed, and just making data more accessible. And getting more people in your organisation with access to that data in a safe way to actually drive more innovation. Those are what I think the priorities should be.
Great. Andrew, can we?
It's a really good question, and one that merits probably quite a lengthy answer. But for me, as I talked earlier on, data is about driving insight and the resulting business action. And that aligns into, if I take Lloyds for an example, our strategy is to help Britain prosper. And where we use data is how can we use data and the insight from data, whether it be a simple dashboard, or whether it be a machine learning model, or whether it be exploring generative AI use cases and how they can help serve our customers better. And for me, one of the exciting things about data is there are core things that need to be done with data, reporting to the regulators, providing that information that data serves. There's also really exciting and innovative spaces that not just Lloyds but other banks are exploring round about how do we serve our customers better, how do we support better customer journeys, and how do we support better outcomes for them.
Thank you.
Hi. Just very much interested in the whole concept of trying to use bank data for better good. I just wanted to ask more on kind of side of, I would say, provisioning data to researchers. Like, how important is synthetic data? What are you doing in that space? And does synthetic data has a role in just enabling that access and maybe making it, I would say, less restricted and maybe available to a wider research population?
Yeah, so actually there is a third arm in Smart Data Foundry that creates synthetic data. So that's the agent-based simulation. But that data is mostly used for innovation. So for example, if you're a fintech and you are working on, you have a new product idea or proposition and there's no data doesn't exist, so you cannot, So that synthetic data is a great kind of starter to start innovating, thinking what's possible, especially when you're looking, for example, as a product that could be linking financial data, a product across sectors, so financial and health, or all sorts of applications. So that's where synthetic data is really useful. In terms of for research purposes, because researchers want to get into, they need that richness, they need that fidelity, 100%. They don't want to do research on the synthetic data. If you're trying to address, net zero affordability, you actually want to start seeing, okay, you want to use the real data, the real data for this. So for research purposes, that's what that's the real data for kind of innovation space, definitely synthetic data. So that's what we do. So I haven't mentioned this because I run out of time, but if you want to talk about synthetic data, I'll come and I'll tell you a bit more what we do in that space.
Excellent, thank you. And actually, we do have a couple of other examples on synthetic data being used generally in the world of innovation. The Financial Conduct Authority has used Smart Data Foundry.
Exactly.
Data.
So our data was used for sandboxes, hackathons, especially around fraud. That's obviously a massive issue. So that's been a lot of use cases around that. Fueling hackathon with NatWest. So yeah, variety of use cases. So really, really amazing source. But when you do innovation, I think that's the purpose. That's brilliant fit for that.
Fabulous. I know we have a question here.
Thank you very much. A question about the security, Andrew. As you know, ChatGPT or AI is a baby now, and we are feeding this baby with the information and data that we have. And sometimes you don't know. For example, your programmer in the bank put a code, Python code that worked, for example, 2 weeks, 3 weeks on it, on the chat GPT, and say, could you check it and tell me what's wrong in it? And this code go to the chat GPT servers. Before that, all the servers was on premises, on the bank, on the company. But now we are delivering, handing the data to ChatGPT and make it bigger and bigger. And where is the baby? This baby is in the US. And as other platforms like YouTube, like Google, and things like that, but a difference. In the YouTube and Google, we get the information, we share the information, but ChatGPT is something different. What is your policy about the data privacy, about keeping the intellectual property for yourself, for your bank? Certainly, I am a programmer now. I don't like to put a code that I've worked, for example, for 2 years to know the intricacies and things like that in ChatGPT. What is your policy about these things? Thank you.
Wonderful. That's an excellent question, isn't it? And we do see a whole variety of how ChatGPT is and is not being used, indeed, in financial services. Andrew, should...
Like most large banks, we don't put our code or our customer data into ChatGPT. So when we look at large language models, they are closed systems, that we have the right guardrails and the right security roundabout, and we are very, very careful, and we have very, very strong guardrails and ethical discussions about how we use that data internally, and we make sure that we believe we are custodians of the data, and that we make sure that we are not exposing it externally, and certainly not to ChatGPT.
Just 1 second, please. Sorry, because to make sure that those online can hear.
So you mean that your employer cannot interact with ChatGPT about programming or things like that? Oh, very good. Thank you.
Great. I think there was another question. There we are. Wonderful.
Thank you. This is a question to all the panelists, I think. Each speaker's mentioned culture, and I read a lot about building a data culture. What specifically do we mean by that within a financial institution? And what's the key differentiator? Where do you start? What is it that needs to change fundamentally?
Great, thank you. Kit, would you want to pick that? Oh, sorry, Andrew. Whichever of you would like to start.
I'll go quite quickly. So first of all, culture is about a set of beliefs for me. So I think the individuals within an organisation need to understand the importance and the role of data. And they need to know how they contribute to it and be willing to make that contribution. And I know that sounds very, very simple, but I think in a lot of organisations there are people who have particular roles and think, well, the data isn't my problem, that's somebody else's problem. But, you know, data is banking. Andrew said it, I'm adopting it. Data is banking, banking is data. Everybody either creates data or uses data. And therefore, people do have to be aware of their responsibilities and and what good would look like is massive.
I agree with everything you're saying. I think one of the things as well is there's a very strong, just building on what you're saying, education focus to make people aware in all roles across the organisation as to the importance of data quality if you're capturing data, the importance of regulation round about data, personal data, and how to deal with it. These are things that are critical to the successful and the safe and compliant handling of data. And I think in terms of culture, one of the other things as well is about helping people use data to be more empirically driven. So are your decisions being made based on data points that support the actions you're taking and the insight that you're deriving and trying to drive? And again, that sounds awful simple, but that is ultimately what it's about. No matter how sophisticated the models are, no matter how sophisticated the tech is, it's about helping organisations make better decisions for your customers.
Lovely, thank you. Magdalena.
Yeah, so for Smart Data Foundry, it's the importance of quality data management, data curation, thinking about the posterity of reuse value of data products that we produce, so they're available for other researchers to start building on rather than starting from scratch. I think that's really powerful to innovate, to build on that. I guess from my perspective, so my background is in qualitative research, and I work with a lot of quantitative data scientists. So bringing that together, qualitative, quantitative research data, that really is so powerful because you create so-called thick data. So I think the two are complementary. So I think that's also part of our culture as well.
Thick data.
Thick.
I love that. I hadn't heard of thick data before. That's great. I know we have a question online. Oh, super.
So it's a question for Andrew. Curious if the Lloyds Group are currently deploying any language models, for example, to analyze customer chats and engage with customers, and how they tackle privacy in these models.
Maybe proprietary perspective on that?
So at the moment, we, as I said on my slide, I don't know if my slide's there actually, if I can put it back up. And one of the things we are doing at the moment is looking at conversational intent and recognising from conversations that customers have with us how we can derive better insight and how we can do that in a safe and compliant way, and ultimately take better customer outcomes. And as you can see from this at the moment, we have a number of use cases that are running at the moment, and that's where we are in terms of that, looking at how we can leverage the technology to achieve better outcomes. Does that answer the question?
I think it was online. So thank you to our online community for that. Are there any final questions in the room? I'm conscious that we want to make sure we have time for our open mic. I might just ask the final question if I can, and answer it as you see. So Andrew, I guess the question I'll pose to you is, as we think about the future of financial services, what innovations are you hoping to see? And Magdalena, the question I'll ask you is, as you think about the future policy arena, what one change would you like to see that could shift the dial? And I guess, Kate, I'll ask you that question around what's the opportunity with AI and data-driven innovation, and what would you like to see?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Oh goodness, now I have to remember what I asked. So for you, it was about what's the innovation in financial services that you would like to see?
I think at the moment the innovation that we are seeing with generative AI is basically how we serve our customers better, and how we provide that intelligent insight and help us take the right actions to support our customers and support them on their journeys. And for me, that's one of the exciting things about my role, is helping to provide the platforms that enable us to do that.
Wonderful, to become the largest fintech in the UK. Noted. Magdalena.
So I think for me, there will be the question about growth and productivity and addressing that. In the UK, we know that this is a major issue, and working in partnership with other organizations who are also focused on the kind of social improving things, like Productivity Institute and Manchester University is doing amazing stuff. The other, closer to here, I would say addressing the child poverty. That would be my second sort of key priority.
Yeah, I'm really struck by the opportunity for the data-driven insights that you offer with the right data. It's fantastic. And Kate?
For me, it's all about better customer outcome. Oh, sorry. For me, it's all about better customer outcomes. Having been in banking for 30 or so years, it's always been a bit of a bone of contention for me that banks have never had a great reputation for service and serving their customers. And with the debate around bank closures and supporting vulnerable customers, you know, that hasn't gone away. What I would love to see is artificial intelligence deployed and to be able to really see some of the improved customer outcomes, being able to see vulnerable customers actually being able to engage with their banks and getting the service they want, being able to see, you know, young couples buying a house and actually improving their own budgeting skills and financial literacy because they've got a personal advisor in their house, in Alexa.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think you said earlier that's, you know, that ambition for 5 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? So 5 years' time, thick data. I mean, there's so much we're learning this evening. It's fantastic. If you wouldn't mind, please, before we go to that open mic, please thank the panel and those that have participated. So it's, I mean, I love the world of financial services. I was saying to somebody earlier on, before I joined the regulator in 2008, I came from the world of hospitality management, the world of hotels, pubs, restaurants, and all of that kind of stuff, and landed in the world of financial services in 2008 at the height of the financial crisis here in the UK, and it's been learning ever since. And then to step into the world of innovation, it's just incredible. What I hope we've done this evening is bring to life the opportunity in the financial services sector, the diversity within the financial services sector, and hopefully that's given you some food for thought. Please continue to engage with us. So now I'm coming to the open mic section of the evening, and who am I handing it over to? Oh, quite. Here we are. Here we are. Thank you, Ian. 30 seconds.
Thanks, Nick. I'll try to be quick. Just firstly, thanks to the Data Lab and CodeBase for putting the event on, and thanks to all the speakers, and Nicola, to yourself. Just great to hear the customers at the heart of the discussion there. So just some shameless self-promotion after that. So just to raise awareness of 2 events and conferences that we've got coming up at FinTech Tables later this year. The first in September in Dundee is based around building security and trust within the industry, and great to hear that at the heart of the discussions today as well. So we'd love to have people along to that to join us. There's various keynotes, panels and security workshops there. And then the second event is a climate collaboration forum that we're hosting over at the new Barclays campus in Glasgow in October. Again, just bringing together key stakeholders and looking at the role of sort of financial services in supporting that transition to net zero through the work that they're doing, the work to support the rest of the ecosystem and work across other industries as well. So open invitations there to everyone to join us who's interested in being part of those conversations. You can come and have a chat with me. And sorry, that was maybe longer than 30 seconds, but well, yeah, thanks again to everyone.
Thanks very much, Ian. So if there isn't anyone else that would like to use this opportunity to talk about what you're doing or share some insights with the community here? No? Great. Well, that allows me to wrap us up, to say thank you for coming and to thank everyone online for joining us. I'm going to make sure, if you bear with me, please, and indulge me, I'm going to make sure I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. Thank you, Data Lab, for providing me with a crib sheet. It's hugely, hugely, hugely helpful. So the QR code for joining the Data Lab community is here on the screen. If you're not already a member, please do join. We at FinTech Scotland actually are involved, and I know it's hugely, hugely, hugely valuable, the information that's shared and indeed the opportunities to learn across such a progressive community. So that's the opportunity there. And then there are a couple of other community events to make sure that they're on your radar and that you're aware of. So next, continuing the theme of financial services, there's 25th of June, the Finance Meetup, where we're going to have more conversation about the application of AI, and that's the free agent offices. And then on the 17th of July, that's the Net Zero Meetup, and that's at Base Centre. So thank you very much. Thank you, Data Lab, for allowing me the opportunity to come and talk to your wonderful community this evening. And thank you to all the panel members who've shared so many brilliant insights into the world of financial services, data, AI, and innovation. Thank you very much, everyone.